Node is getting support for many ES6 features. However, there may be other Babel plugins and other presets like React and other ES 2015 like module imports that you might want to take advantage of. So what we'll first do is install Babel CLI, babel-preset-env, babel-preset ES 2015, which is ES6, babel-preset React, and Babel plugin transform object rest spread. These are just examples of plugins and presets that we can use with Node. Now that we have all of that installed, let's take a look at some code that we can compile with Babel. We have a source directory with an index.js. We have an async function that's called load data that receives a username that we call here. We'll show that we console log. We'll use Axios to make HTTP requests to the GitHub API to get some user information. And then we'll just log out some basic information. Now we'll set up our Babel configuration. We'll create a file called babel-rc, and inside of here will be an object, and we have two types of options. We have presets and we have plugins. First will be our presets, which include React, ES 2015, as well as our env preset. We also have a plugin, and that is the plugin transform object rest spread. However, we'll just reference it with the transform object rest spread. And now this will allow us to run a Babel node, and it will then start up our server, as well as we could also compile to a static file. Now we'll go into our package.json, and in our scripts, we'll add two scripts. Our start will run Babel node source/index.js because that's where our index.js is. And this will just run Babel with our babelrc configuration. If you want to output the files, we can create a build, which will then just run Babel. We'll provide it files to look for, and that'll just be anything in our source directory. And then we'll say output to a dist folder. Now, if we go and run npm run build, we'll see that a dist directory is created. You can see that our code has been compiled. So we went from source, where we import and all of this async information, to a compiled dist function with requires. In Node 7.6, async await was supported by default. So what we want to do is use the platform and the native features inside of Node rather than using Babel to compile compatible code. So what we'll need to do is go to our babelrc, and instead of env here, we'll add this as an array. And inside here, the second piece of the array will be an object of configuration. We'll then say targets. We'll then say node, because we're using node, and then we can provide a compatibility version. And this will then only compile features that are not supported by Node. So in this case, we could say 7.6, and it will only compile features that Node 7.6 does not support. One other thing to note is that babel-preset-env ships with all the plugins and polyfills that it needs to support the targeted versions of Node and other things that are supported by ECMAScript standards. So that means that shipping and installing anything like ES 2015 or other standard ECMAScript plugins is completely unnecessary. So if your configuration includes something like ES 2015, you can go ahead and remove it. However, if you're using other features on the server, like using React for server-side rendering, you will still need to include those particular presets or plugins because they are not ECMAScript standards. Another feature of babel-preset-env is that rather than specifying a specific Node version like we have done here with 7.6, we can say current, and it will target the current Node version running. Now that we have this configured, if we go back to our terminal and type npm run build, and then go open our index in our dist, we can see that no longer is the async and await transpiled. We can just see that it leaves it as is and allows us to use the features that are inside of Node by standard. Now, if we switch back to our terminal again and type npm start, This will run our start configuration, which is the babel-node source/index.js. So this way it will not update or output anything to the dist, but it will just run the command with our configuration applied. And so we see that loading data, we've made the call and output our information.